My female boss sabotaged a huge deal. She called me trash and left me stranded. But my secret family connection changed everything. A prolonged period. It was as if my very existence was an affront to her, a constant reminder of something she found utterly unpalatable. The subtle eye rolls when I spoke during team meetings, the barely audible sighs of exasperation, the way she'd ostentatiously check her watch whenever I was explaining something to a new client. It all chipped away at my confidence, leaving me feeling perpetually on edge, second-guessing every decision, every word that left my mouth. She had a knack for making me feel profoundly uncomfortable, a skill she seemed to cultivate with an almost malicious glee. It wasn't overt aggression, not shouting or direct insults, but a far more insidious form of psychological warfare, a constant barrage of microaggressions that slowly but surely eroded my sense of self-worth within the workplace. The air around her was always heavy with a silent judgment, an invisible cloud of condescension that enveloped me the moment I entered her orbit. I'd find myself avoiding the break room when she was there, taking longer routes to the printer, anything to minimize contact, to escape the suffocating weight of her disapproval. It was a bizarre inversion of roles. I was the seasoned employee, the trainer, yet she, the newcomer, had somehow managed to turn me into the one constantly feeling scrutinized, perpetually inadequate. The worst part was the way she'd twist my words, taking a helpful suggestion and rephrasing it as a naive blunder, or turning a minor oversight into a catastrophic failure, always delivered with that same chillingly calm, almost pitying tone that suggested I was just too simple to grasp the true complexities of our work. The initial irritation I felt had slowly curdled into a simmering resentment, a quiet despair that began to overshadow my enjoyment of a job I had once genuinely loved. I started dreading Mondays, counting down the hours until Friday, my professional life becoming a monotonous cycle of anticipating and enduring Jade's relentless, passive-aggressive onslaught. It wasn't just about the criticism. It was about the deliberate way she sought to diminish me, to make me feel small and insignificant, as if my contributions were not only worthless, but actively detrimental to the company's success. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand why. There was no clear motive, no personal slight I could recall, just this relentless, unyielding contempt that seemed to emanate from her very core, directed squarely at me, turning what should have been a straightforward training period into a protracted, psychological battleground where I was constantly on the defensive, always feeling as though I was failing to meet some invisible, impossibly high standard she had set. The turning point, the moment her subtle disdain curdled into something far more malignant, arrived with the monthly sales report, a simple email that, for me, heralded a brief respite from the constant low-level anxiety she induced. Seeing my name at the top, bolded and accompanied by a congratulatory message from the regional manager, best salesperson of the month, was a small victory, a validation that despite Jade's relentless attempts to chip away at my confidence, I was still good at my job. But for Jade, it was apparently a declaration of war. The very next morning, the air around her wasn't just heavy with judgment. It was thick with a palpable, poisonous envy that seemed to radiate from her in waves, a sickly green aura visible only to me. Her eyes, usually so calculating and cold, now held a glint of something akin to genuine hatred whenever they landed on my desk, on my computer screen, or, God forbid, on me. The petty remarks and condescending tones that had been her previous weapon of choice began to escalate, transforming into a systematic campaign of subtle, yet incredibly disruptive, harassment. It started small, almost imperceptibly, making me question my own memory, my own sanity. My favorite pen, the one with the surprisingly comfortable grip, would vanish from my desk, only to mysteriously reappear days later, tucked away in a drawer I never used, or sometimes, not at all. Then, my personal mug, a gift from my niece, would be found in the sink, unwashed and filled with stale coffee, even though I'd left it clean on my coaster. These were minor irritations, yes, but they were consistent, a drip of annoyance designed, I suspected, to wear me down. The incidents began to escalate in severity and impact, moving beyond mere annoyance into outright sabotage. I'd arrive at my desk in the mornings, ready to tackle the day's tasks, only to find that critical information had vanished from my computer. Schedules I'd meticulously crafted and saved within our corporate programs, detailing client meetings, product launches, and follow-up calls gone. Poof, vanished into thin air, forcing me to waste precious hours painstakingly recreating them from scratch, hours that should have been spent on actual sales calls. It wasn't just a simple deletion either. It felt like a surgical strike, as if someone knew exactly where to look, what to target, to cause maximum disruption without leaving an obvious trail. Then came the documents. Important contracts, proposals, client briefs, files that were essential for my work, either for ongoing projects or for upcoming presentations, would suddenly be missing from their designated folders on the shared drive, or worse, physically missing from my desk, only to be found later, subtly crumpled or with a page torn out, just enough damage to render them useless without immediate reprinting or retrieval. The worst was when I'd be in the middle of a crucial phone call with a potential client, right at the cusp of closing a deal, and my line would inexplicably go dead. Not a dropped call due to poor signal, but a deliberate, abrupt cutoff, as if someone had physically pulled the plug. It happened not once, but repeatedly, always at the most inconvenient, most critical moments, leaving me scrambling, apologizing profusely to confused and increasingly frustrated clients, and often losing the sale entirely. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a pattern, a meticulously orchestrated campaign of interference designed to create constant, infuriating obstacles for me at work, to trip me up, to make me look incompetent, disorganized, and unreliable. Precisely the traits Jade had accused me of possessing from the very beginning. The cumulative effect was devastating. My productivity plummeted, not because of a lack of effort on my part, but because I was constantly fighting an invisible battle, trying to mitigate the damage caused by her calculated malevolence. My stress level skyrocketed, sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford, and the constant vigilance required to protect my work, my belongings, and my reputation began to consume every waking moment. It was no longer just about enduring her presence. It was about surviving her deliberate, insidious attempts to undermine my career, to push me out, all because I had dared to achieve something, to succeed where she evidently believed I had no right to. The office, once a place of purpose and professional growth, had transformed into a minefield, and I was constantly bracing for the next explosion, the next petty act of sabotage designed to shatter my focus and derail my progress, all fueled by the bitter, corrosive envy of one person. The pattern of interruptions, the inexplicable disconnects during crucial client calls, had become a maddeningly consistent theme in my work life, turning every phone conversation into a tightrope walk over a chasm of potential failure. There was one call, though, that solidified my suspicions from vague dread into concrete certainty, a moment when the veil of plausible deniability was ripped away, exposing the ugly truth beneath. I was deep into a complex negotiation with a high-value client, Mr. Henderson, a notoriously difficult but potentially lucrative account. The conversation was flowing, I was making headway, and for a fleeting moment, I actually felt a flicker of my old confidence return. Then, without warning, the line went dead, the familiar click and hum replaced by an unsettling silence. My blood ran cold, a wave of familiar frustration washing over me. But this time, something was different. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a fleeting movement, a blur of motion near my desk, and my gaze snapped towards it. There she was, Jade, standing a mere 2 feet away, her back partially turned to me, her hand subtly retracting from the area where my phone cord connected to the wall jack. Her posture was too casual, almost exaggeratedly so, as if she were merely stretching, but the faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips, the quick, darting glance she shot in my direction before swiftly turning away, it was all I needed. My heart hammered against my ribs, a mixture of rage and sickening realization flooding through me. It wasn't just a random technical glitch, it was deliberate, malicious, and utterly brazen. I slammed the receiver back onto its cradle, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the suddenly silent office space between us. Jade, the word ripped from my throat, sharper and louder than I'd intended, drawing the attention of a few nearby colleagues who briefly looked up from their screens, then quickly looked away, sensing the tension. She slowly turned, her expression morphing into one of feigned innocence, her eyebrows arching slightly, as if genuinely surprised by my outburst. "Yes?" she asked, her voice a soft, almost sweet inquiry, utterly devoid of any hint of guilt. "You disconnected my phone," I accused, my voice trembling with suppressed fury, pointing a shaking finger towards the dangling cord. Her eyes widened, a theatrical display of shock, before narrowing into familiar, icy slits. "Oh, did I?" she drawled, her voice dripping with sarcasm, her gaze sliding pointedly to the still disconnected cord. "And where, pray tell, is your proof?" The sheer audacity of her question, the open challenge, sent a fresh wave of adrenaline coursing through me. I stammered, trying to articulate what I had seen, the subtle movements, the timing, the undeniable smirk. But as I spoke, her mocking laughter filled the small space, a low, guttural chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. "Without direct evidence," she purred, leaning closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper meant only for my ears. Management can't do a thing. Can they, darling? Her words were a chilling confirmation of her knowledge of the company's policies, her understanding of the limitations of a he-said-she-said scenario. I immediately reported the incident to our team lead, recounting every detail, the vanishing schedules, the destroyed documents, the interrupted calls, and finally, the blatant act of disconnecting my phone. The team lead listened patiently, nodding empathetically, but his hands were tied. He explained, with a sigh of regret, that without concrete, undeniable proof, a video recording, an eyewitness willing to testify, something more than my word against hers, their hands were largely tied when it came to severe disciplinary action. They could have a word with her, issue a verbal warning, perhaps, but anything more would require undeniable evidence. And Jade, knowing this, reveled in her impunity. She continued to mock me with thinly veiled taunts and knowing glances, her behavior growing even more audacious in the days that followed, almost as if she were celebrating her victory in this twisted game. The ultimate act of contempt, the one that truly broke something inside me, occurred a few days later. I had left my wallet on my desk for a brief moment, stepping away to grab a coffee, a habit I had never before considered dangerous in our ostensibly secure office environment. When I returned, it felt lighter. A quick check confirmed my dread. A significant amount of cash, meant for my weekly groceries, was gone. My stomach churned with a mixture of disbelief and utter revulsion. And then, I saw her, walking past my desk, her gaze lingering for a fraction of a second, her lips curving into that familiar, infuriating smirk. "Think of it as a bonus, darling," she whispered, her eyes twinkling with malicious amusement, her voice light and airy, as if she were discussing the weather. She didn't break stride, just floated past, leaving me standing there, my wallet empty, my mind reeling. The sheer brazenness of her theft a final, brutal confirmation that she truly believed she was untouchable, capable of doing whatever she pleased, with me as her personal, helpless victim. After the incident with my stolen cash, a thick, suffocating cloud of paranoia settled over me whenever I was in the office, constantly checking my belongings, double-checking my saved work, and casting wary glances over my shoulder. Yet, amidst this suffocating atmosphere, a significant opportunity emerged, a lifeline thrown into the turbulent waters of my professional life that momentarily, almost miraculously, made me forget the petty torments of my tormentor. I was officially designated the main contact, the lead negotiator, for an incredibly promising deal with a major medical equipment manufacturer, a sprawling, international conglomerate known for its cutting-edge technology and rigorous procurement processes. This wasn't just another sales opportunity. This was the kind of game-changing contract that could redefine my career, elevate our department, and bring in a staggering $5 million in revenue for the company, a sum that made everyone from the junior associates to the executive board sit up and take notice. The weight of responsibility was immense, but so was the thrill of the challenge, the pure, unadulterated excitement of securing such a monumental achievement. I pored over every detail, every specification, every clause, meticulously preparing presentations, forecasts, and proposals, determined to seize this chance and prove my worth beyond any shadow of a doubt. This was my moment, a chance to silence not just Jade's insidious whispers, but the nagging doubts that had begun to fester in my own mind. However, the universe, it seemed, had a perverse sense of humor, or perhaps, our management was simply oblivious to the subtle, psychological warfare being waged right under their noses. Despite my increasingly vocal, albeit diplomatically phrased, concerns about Jade's professional conduct and the undeniable, suffocating distrust that had permeated our working relationship, despite the numerous complaints I had quietly lodged about mysteriously deleted files and inexplicably dropped calls, and despite her blatant, almost celebrated, history of undermining my efforts, the unthinkable happened. In a decision that felt less like a strategic assignment and more like a cruel, twisted joke, Jade was officially assigned to be my assistant on this colossal, potentially career-defining deal. The news hit me like a physical blow, a cold, dread-inducing wave that washed away the brief surge of professional euphoria I had felt. My protests, when I finally managed to articulate them to my incredulous team lead, were met with blank stares and corporate platitudes about teamwork and utilizing all available resources efficiently. It was explained to me that Jade, with her perceived attention to detail and her ability to organize, even if her methods were sometimes unconventional, was deemed the most logical choice to support me on such a high-stakes project. The irony was so bitter it almost choked me. The very person who had systematically sabotaged my work, who had openly expressed her contempt for my abilities, who had deliberately tried to derail my progress at every turn, was now inexplicably positioned as my right hand, granted direct access to every sensitive document, every critical communication, every fragile step we took towards securing that life-changing $5 million deal. It was a terrifying prospect, a constant, gnawing anxiety that burrowed deep into my subconscious, turning every strategy meeting, every email exchange, every shared document into a potential trap. I knew, with an icy certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this assignment wasn't just about her assisting me. It was about her gaining unparalleled access to the very core of my most important professional undertaking, an access she would undoubtedly exploit, transforming this golden opportunity into another battlefield in her relentless, personal war against me. The weight of the deal now felt twice as heavy, burdened not just by the usual pressures of high-stakes negotiation, but by the ever-present, insidious threat of betrayal from within, a ticking time bomb counting down towards an inevitable and potentially catastrophic act of sabotage from the very person I was forced to rely upon. My initial fears regarding Jade's involvement in the $5 million deal proved to be not only warranted, but tragically understated. The insidious nature of her sabotage, always just beneath the surface, began to bubble up, manifesting in ways that were increasingly difficult to explain away as mere incompetence or oversight. The first major blow came during the crucial preparatory phase for our initial meeting with the medical equipment manufacturer. I had meticulously compiled a comprehensive dossier of product specifications, pricing models, and case studies, all tailored to their specific needs and interests. This information, vital for establishing our credibility and demonstrating our understanding of their requirements, was shared with Jade, ostensibly for her to organize and format for presentation. What I received, and what was subsequently sent to the client under the company's official letterhead, was a masterclass in deliberate subversion. Instead of the cutting-edge diagnostic tools and specialized surgical instruments we were pitching, the client received a jumbled mess of outdated brochures for entirely irrelevant products, generic hospital beds, basic first aid kits, even a few pages detailing obsolete office furniture our company had once sold years ago. It was a chaotic, embarrassing collage of inappropriate materials, clearly designed to undermine our professionalism and confuse the client before we even had a chance to speak. The immediate fallout was a series of terse, bewildered emails from Mr. Henderson's team, demanding clarification and expressing their profound disappointment. I spent frantic hours damage controlling, issuing profuse apologies, and resending the correct materials, all while Jade sat calmly at her desk, an almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips whenever she thought I wasn't looking. But even that calculated act of sabotage, damaging as it was, paled in comparison to the crescendo of her meanness, the moment that truly encapsulated the depth of her malicious intent. The day of the crucial initial meeting arrived, a day that held the potential to either launch my career into the stratosphere or send it crashing down. I had packed my bags the night before, meticulously organized all my presentation materials, and mentally rehearsed every possible scenario. The flight was scheduled for early morning, and per standard procedure, Jade was responsible for booking my ticket and ensuring all travel arrangements were confirmed. I arrived at the airport with a nervous flutter in my stomach, a mix of apprehension and eager anticipation, only to find my name conspicuously absent from the passenger manifest at the check-in counter. Panic began to set in, a cold, creeping dread that tightened its grip with every passing minute. I frantically pulled out my phone, dialing Jade's number, my fingers fumbling with urgency. She answered on the third ring, her voice sickeningly cheerful, almost playful. "Oh, you're at the airport, darling," she chirped, a feigned innocence in her tone that grated on my already frayed nerves. "Yes, where's my ticket?" "It's not showing up," I stammered, my voice rising in pitch with each word, the noise of the bustling terminal fading into a dull roar around me. There was a moment of silence on the line, a pregnant pause that stretched interminably, filled only with the faint sound of her breathing. Then, she let out a slow, deliberate chuckle, a sound that twisted my gut into knots, a sound brimming with pure, unadulterated contempt. "Your ticket?" she repeated, drawing out the words, her voice dripping with mock surprise. "Oh, I didn't book it." My blood ran cold, the words hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "What do you mean you didn't book it?" I yelled, my voice cracking, the attention of a few curious bystanders turning towards my increasingly desperate outburst. And then came the phrase, delivered with a chilling nonchalance, a triumphant sneer audible even through the phone, a dagger plunged directly into my professional ambitions. "Today is a $5 million deal." Should I carry the trash? The words hung in the air, a cruel, explicit declaration of her intent, a blatant admission of her malicious joy in seeing me stranded, helpless, utterly humiliated. She wasn't just refusing to do her job. She was openly stating her belief that I was worthless, mere trash, undeserving of the opportunity before me. The line went dead before I could even formulate a coherent response, leaving me standing there in the bustling airport, stranded, abandoned, and utterly powerless, the full weight of her calculated cruelty crashing down on me. The realization that she had deliberately orchestrated this, leaving me high and dry for the most important meeting of my career, all while mocking my very worth, solidified a burning rage within me, a quiet, simmering fury that transcended mere frustration and settled into a deep, unshakable resolve. This wasn't just about a deal anymore. It was about survival, about reclaiming my dignity from the clutches of someone who clearly intended to destroy me. Stranded at the bustling airport, the cruel laughter of Jade still echoing in my ears, a cold, impotent fury raged within me, threatening to consume what little composure I had left. The humiliation was searing, the professional consequences potentially catastrophic. But then, amidst the chaos of my spiraling despair, a single, potent thought cut through the noise, a shimmering sliver of hope that had remained my most closely guarded secret, my ultimate, unspoken ace in the hole. Jade, in her relentless pursuit of my downfall, in her arrogant assumption of my insignificance, was completely, utterly oblivious to the most crucial piece of information, the one detail that could unravel her entire meticulously crafted scheme of sabotage. The CEO of this very medical equipment manufacturing giant, the man at the helm of the $5 million deal, was my older brother, Kyle. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave, washing away the immediate sting of her betrayal and replacing it with a surge of renewed purpose, a cold, calculating resolve. It wasn't just a matter of family connection. Kyle and I had always shared an unbreakable bond, a deep-seated loyalty forged in childhood and strengthened through years of mutual support. He knew my work ethic, he knew my character, and he certainly knew the kind of underhanded tactics people sometimes employed in the cutthroat corporate world. My fingers, still trembling from the shock of Jade's ultimate act of sabotage, moved with newfound urgency, unlocking my phone and immediately dialing his direct line. It rang twice. Then his familiar, calm voice answered, already imbued with the brisk efficiency of a high-powered executive. "Hey sis, what's up? Everything okay with the meeting?" he asked, his tone betraying no hint of the chaos unfolding on my end. "Kyle, no. Everything is definitely not okay," I blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in my haste, my voice still edged with the raw emotion of the airport debacle. I took a deep, shaky breath, forcing myself to slow down, to articulate the situation clearly and concisely, despite the raging storm inside me. I explained everything, leaving no detail untouched. The months of petty persecution, the disappearing files, the interrupted calls, the deliberately inappropriate materials sent to his team, and finally, the ultimate betrayal, Jade's refusal to book my flight, her cruel words, leaving me stranded and humiliated at the airport. I could hear the subtle shift in his breathing on the other end of the line, the sudden tension in his silence as he absorbed the full weight of my confession. When I finished, the usual calm in his voice was replaced by a low, dangerous rumble, a tone I knew well, one reserved for moments of profound anger or deep concern. That is completely unacceptable," he growled, his voice tight with suppressed fury. "I'm so sorry you've had to go through this." Then, his voice softened slightly, regaining its characteristic pragmatism. "All right, listen carefully. What flight were you supposed to be on?" I told him the flight number and the scheduled departure time, the urgency of the situation pressing down on me. "Okay, I'm already looking it up," he said, his fingers audibly flying across a keyboard on his end. "The next available flight is in 2 hours, but it's fully booked. Give me a minute." The line went silent for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only about 60 seconds, filled with the click-clack of his keyboard and the faint murmur of his voice as he spoke to someone else, presumably his executive assistant or airline contacts. When he spoke again, his voice was firm, resolute, and filled with a quiet triumph. "Done. You're on the waiting list, and with my connections, you'll be on that flight. Go to the priority check-in desk, give them my name, and tell them you're traveling for the meeting. They'll take care of you." A wave of immense relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees right there in the terminal. The panic receded, replaced by a surge of grim determination. This wasn't just about salvaging the deal anymore. It was about justice. This was my chance, the perfect, irrefutable opportunity to expose Jade for the manipulative, destructive force she truly was, to strip away her veneer of innocence and reveal the malicious intent that had plagued my professional life for far too long. The game was on, and this time, I had a secret weapon she could never have anticipated, a bond she could never break, and a vengeance that would be meticulously, deliberately served. The relief of securing a seat on the next flight to the client's city was immense, a quiet triumph that fueled my resolve. I spent the 2-hour wait at the airport meticulously re-reviewing my presentation, preparing not just for the meeting with Mr. Henderson, but for the inevitable confrontation that awaited Jade. As the plane taxied for takeoff, my phone, still clutched in my hand, vibrated with an incoming call. It was Jade. A slow, knowing smile spread across my face. The pieces were falling into place. I let it ring once, twice, enjoying the frantic impatience I imagined on the other end, before finally answering. Her voice, usually so composed and condescending, was now a panicked, desperate squeak, utterly devoid of its usual venom. "What is going on?" she demanded, her voice high-pitched and trembling. "Kyle just called me, screaming, asking where you were, why you weren't on the flight. He's furious. He said he's the CEO." The sheer, unadulterated shock in her voice was almost comical, a sweet melody of vindication to my ears. The realization, crashing down on her with the force of a wrecking ball, that the man she had so casually dismissed as the client was, in fact, the very top of the food chain, and my brother to boot, was a moment I had envisioned, albeit never quite so perfectly. I allowed a beat of silence to hang in the air, letting her frantic words and the sudden, acute awareness of her impending doom sink in, before responding with a calm, almost detached tone that belied the simmering satisfaction within me. "Yes, Jade, he is indeed the CEO, and he's waiting for me, thanks to your little stunt." There was a choked gasp on the other end, followed by a torrent of incoherent apologies and fumbling excuses, a desperate scramble to reframe her actions, to paint herself as a victim of circumstance, of misunderstanding. She tried to backtrack, to explain away her refusal to book my ticket as an oversight, the inappropriate materials as a system error, her stolen cash as a misplaced item. But the pathetic attempts at justification were too little, too late, and entirely transparent. The damage was done, the truth exposed, and her carefully constructed facade of professional competence and subtle malice was crumbling around her. As soon as I landed, before I even had a chance to collect my thoughts, my phone rang again. It was Kyle, but this time his voice was a low, simmering volcano, barely contained. He didn't waste a single second on pleasantries, launching directly into a blistering condemnation of Jade's behavior. "I just spoke to her," he seethed, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Her excuses are pathetic, and her audacity to call you trash? Inexcusable, absolutely unforgivable." His fury was palpable, not just as a CEO protecting his company's interests, but as a brother defending his sibling from a malicious attack. He then dropped another bombshell that sent a fresh wave of disbelief and vindication through me. "And I've already spoken to Uncle Robert. He's livid. He wants you both in his office first thing tomorrow morning." Uncle Robert was, of course, the CEO of our company, the one I had been working for all these years. His involvement elevated the situation from an internal personnel issue to a high-level corporate crisis, demonstrating the gravity of Jade's actions and the immediate, undeniable consequences she now faced. The gravity of the situation, now amplified by the direct intervention of both CEOs, our brother and our uncle, seemed to finally hit Jade with the full force of a tsunami. When she called me later that evening, her voice was no longer just panicked. It was riddled with genuine fear, bordering on desperation. She knew she was cornered, exposed, and facing the wrath of two powerful figures who were not only professional titans, but also family. Kyle, my brother, had made it explicitly clear during his earlier call with her that he was utterly outraged by her behavior, particularly her demeaning and abusive language towards me, labeling me trash. He had conveyed, in no uncertain terms, that such contemptible conduct was unacceptable in any professional setting, let alone when dealing with a crucial business partner and, more importantly, a direct family member. He, along with Uncle Robert, had laid down an ultimatum. Jade was to offer a full, unequivocal apology for her actions, not just for the professional sabotage, but for the personal degradation she had inflicted upon me, and she was to be prepared to face the severe, inevitable consequences of her choices. There would be no more excuses, no more deflections, no more hiding behind vague denials. The game was truly over, and for the first time in 6 long, agonizing months, the bitter taste of vindication was finally beginning to replace the lingering sting of her relentless cruelty. The air in Uncle Robert's office the next morning was thick with tension, a palpable weight that pressed down on all of us as Jade and I sat across from him. Our brother Kyle's presence a silent, unwavering force beside mine. Jade, despite the clear and present danger to her career, still clung to a desperate shred of her former arrogance, her face pale, but her eyes still holding that familiar glint of cunning. When Uncle Robert, his expression stern and unyielding, began to outline the charges against her, the deliberately erroneous documents, the interrupted calls, the unbooked flight, she immediately launched into her well-rehearsed defense, a dizzying concoction of half-truths and outright fabrications. She tried, with a renewed surge of audacity, to turn the tables, to accuse me of orchestrating a convoluted conspiracy against her, twisting every incident, every perceived slight, into a narrative where I was the conniving aggressor and she the innocent victim. Her voice, though still tinged with panic, regained some of its manipulative charm as she spun a tale of my supposed jealousy and my desperate attempts to undermine her, even going so far as to suggest I had somehow sabotaged my own flight to frame her, an absurd claim that hung in the air, heavy with desperation. But this time I was ready. I had anticipated her predictable attempts at deflection and blame shifting, and I had come armed with the irrefutable evidence she had always believed I lacked. With a calm I didn't entirely feel, I reached into my bag and produced a small, unassuming digital recorder. "With all due respect, Jade," I stated, my voice steady, "I have proof." I pressed play, and the small device filled the room with a chillingly clear recording of her voice, captured during a particularly aggressive and condescending encounter just weeks prior, where she had explicitly mocked my inexperience and dismissed my contributions, her words dripping with contempt. The audio laid bare her consistent pattern of verbal abuse and professional degradation, a stark contrast to her current facade of innocence. Then, as her eyes widened in a mixture of shock and dawning horror, the recording seamlessly transitioned to the most damning piece of evidence, the brief, yet utterly incriminating, phone call from the airport, where her voice, clear as a bell, delivered the infamous line, "Today is a $5 million deal. Should I carry the trash?" The sound of her own cruel words echoed in the suddenly silent office, leaving no room for denial, no space for interpretation. Her face drained of all color, her jaw clenched, and she could only sit there, utterly exposed, as her own voice condemned her. But the audio recordings, damning as they were merely the first wave of the undeniable truth. Uncle Robert, after a moment of stunned silence, leaned forward, his gaze piercing as he addressed Jade directly. "Jade," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "it appears you were under a profound misapprehension about the extent of our corporate security protocols." He then proceeded to dismantle her entire web of lies with cold, irrefutable facts. He explained, in meticulous detail, that every single action performed within the corporate network, every file accessed, every document deleted, every schedule modified, every email sent, even every attempt to disconnect a phone line from the central system, was meticulously tracked and logged. He pulled up a monitor on his desk and with a few clicks, displayed a timeline of her activity, a digital breadcrumb trail leading directly to her culpability. There were timestamps of her accessing my client files before sending the inappropriate materials, logs of her deleting my schedules, and even a record of a specific network interruption that coincided precisely with the moment my phone line went dead during the call with Mr. Henderson. The weight of this technical evidence, presented with such undeniable clarity, crushed any remaining hope she had of plausible deniability. She had operated under the delusion that her actions, subtle and often untraceable by direct observation, would remain hidden, anonymous. What she didn't know, what she could never have anticipated, was that every keystroke, every click, every digital whisper within the company's infrastructure was being silently and systematically recorded. Her entire campaign of professional sabotage had been meticulously documented, a digital footprint tracing every malicious step she had taken. The realization that her every move had been meticulously logged, that her hidden malice was now laid bare for all to see, seemed to finally break her. She slumped in her chair, her shoulders caving in, the last vestiges of her defiance crumbling into a pathetic heap of defeat. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only with the faint hum of the office electronics and the stark, irrefutable evidence of her lies, finally, irrevocably exposed. The moment Uncle Robert finished presenting the irrefutable digital evidence, a profound silence descended upon the office, broken only by Jade's ragged breathing. Her defiant posture had completely collapsed, replaced by a defeated slump, her face utterly devoid of its usual cunning, now a mask of sheer terror. There was no argument left, no desperate plea she could make, no corner she could squirm into to escape the crushing weight of her exposed malice. Uncle Robert, his voice resonating with cold authority, wasted no time. "Jade," he began, his tone final, leaving no room for negotiation or appeal. "Effective immediately, you are suspended without pay, pending further review." The word suspended was merely a formality, a brief administrative pause before the inevitable axe fell. She was escorted out of the office within minutes by security personnel, her belongings, packed by HR, sent after her, a swift, ignominious exit that left an eerie void in the space she had once poisoned. The further review lasted less than 24 hours. The following morning, an official email circulated through the company, a concise, clinically worded announcement that simply stated, "Jade's employment has been terminated, effective immediately." It was a quiet, almost understated end to her reign of terror, but the ripple effect within the office was palpable. A collective sigh of relief seemed to sweep through the cubicles, a subtle shift in the oppressive atmosphere that had lingered for months. Colleagues who had previously avoided eye contact with me now offered hesitant smiles, and even a few murmured words of support, a tacit acknowledgement of the invisible battle I had been fighting. However, for Jade, termination was far from the end of her problems. It was merely the opening act of a much larger, far more devastating drama. The company, armed with the wealth of undeniable digital evidence, and propelled by Uncle Robert's unwavering resolve to protect our reputation and recoup our losses, moved swiftly and decisively. They initiated a comprehensive internal investigation, meticulously cataloging every instance of her sabotage and calculating the financial fallout. The true extent of the damage she had inflicted was staggering, far beyond the petty annoyances I had endured. There were the tangible losses, the significant expenses incurred from the initially botched medical equipment deal, including the additional travel costs for my rescheduled flight, the resources wasted on damage control, and the lost opportunity cost of the prolonged negotiations. Then there were the sales opportunities one had irrevocably lost due to her deliberate interruptions and deleted client data, deals that amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential revenue. But the company's lawsuit against her extended beyond mere direct financial costs. They were also pursuing her for the far more nebulous, yet equally damaging, issue of reputational harm. Her actions, particularly the sending of inappropriate materials to a high-profile client like Mr. Henderson's company, had cast a shadow over our professional image, necessitating extensive efforts to mend damaged relationships and restore trust. The legal team meticulously documented how her systematic undermining of my work had not only cost specific deals, but had also subtly eroded our standing with other clients who might have witnessed or been affected by her disruptive behavior. The sheer scale of the damages being sought was enormous, a crushing financial burden that would likely follow her for decades. News trickled through the grapevine. Her attempts to find new employment in any field even remotely related to our industry were meeting with resounding rejections. Her name, now irrevocably tainted by the legal proceedings and the widely known circumstances of her dismissal, was red-flagged across the professional landscape. Jade, the woman who had once reveled in her perceived superiority and delighted in making my life a living hell, now faced a future characterized by monumental debt, a shattered reputation, and virtually no prospects of meaningful employment in the sector she had so arrogantly believed herself to dominate. The tables had turned, and the very ground she thought she stood on had crumbled beneath her, leaving her to face the harsh, unforgiving consequences of her own malice. With Jade finally gone, her toxic presence removed from the office like a malignant tumor, a profound sense of calm settled over my life, gradually replacing the constant anxiety that had been my unwelcome companion for months. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but a slow, steady return to normalcy, a rediscovery of the joy and purpose I once found in my work. The oppressive cloud of paranoia lifted, and I could breathe again, truly breathe, without constantly looking over my shoulder or bracing for the next subtle act of sabotage. My desk, once a battleground, became my sanctuary once more, a place where I could focus, create, and excel without fear. The most significant shift, however, came in my own perception of myself, largely due to the unexpected validation from a source I had always considered beyond my reach, my brother, Kyle. Growing up, Kyle had always been the golden child, the brilliant older brother who excelled at everything he touched, soaring to heights I could only dream of. His ascension to CEO of a major corporation had only solidified this perception of him as an almost mythical figure, unapproachable in his professional eminence. Yet, through this entire ordeal, he had seen me, truly seen my capabilities, my resilience, and the sheer effort I poured into my work, despite Jade's relentless attempts to tear me down. His words of unwavering support, his quiet commendation of my perseverance, and the active role he played in exposing Jade's lies, offering me not just professional backing, but profound familial solidarity, instilled in me an incredible, newfound confidence. His recognition, more than any other accolade, resonated deep within my core, affirming my worth in a way that silenced the lingering echoes of Jade's cruel dismissals. Freed from the constant drain of fighting a hidden war, my professional performance soared. My sales figures, which had stagnated under the weight of Jade's interference, began to climb steadily, then dramatically, each successful deal a testament to my regained focus and renewed drive. I approached clients with a fresh sense of assertiveness, my presentations sharper, my negotiations more confident, my overall approach radiating a capability I hadn't fully embraced before. I felt more competent, more capable, and utterly in control of my career trajectory. The fear that had once shackled me was replaced by a quiet, determined ambition. This professional renaissance also had a profound ripple effect on my personal life. The stress of Jade's persecution had, over time, subtly eroded some of my closest relationships. I had become withdrawn, consumed by the workplace drama, often bringing that negativity home. But with her gone, and with my own renewed sense of self-worth, I found myself reaching out, actively re-engaging with my family. The barriers I had unknowingly erected, the distance I had inadvertently created, began to crumble. Dinners became more frequent, conversations flowed more easily, and the genuine warmth and laughter returned to our interactions. It was during these moments, reconnecting with the people who truly mattered, that I fully grasped the depth of my own value, not just as an employee, but as a sister, a daughter, a friend. The ordeal with Jade, traumatic as it was, had inadvertently stripped away layers of insecurity, forcing me to confront and overcome external malice, which in turn illuminated my own inherent strength. I understood now, with crystal clarity, that my worth was not determined by the condescending remarks of a resentful colleague, nor by the transient successes or failures of a single deal. It was intrinsic, undeniable, and finally, fully embraced. My new beginning wasn't just about a better job or increased sales. It was about a profound personal reclamation, a realization of my own importance, and an unwavering belief in my ability to navigate whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing now that I possessed an inner resilience that even the most venomous envy could not extinguish.